It's cool. It's unique.
That's a kill. There's one. First and last time I make the headlines. 5 of them.
Oh no, bro! No, that should have been a 6 on. Oh, ah! I got a 5 on times 2. Bro, my udders are tensed.
Alright, what is going on YouTube? And today we got a brand new episode of Quickscoping for Christ. One I'm very excited to bring you. And we got a lot to cover, guys. We got some new maps. We got Grind Ooze and we got Bullet on Black Ops 6.
No!
And these are pretty fantastic maps in my opinion. Grind Ooze is not as good as Grind from Black Ops 4 or Black Ops 2, that's for sure. But it is good, it's refreshing. It's a colorful map. And so far, I think the best part about Black Ops 6 is its maps, and Bullet is no exception. We have gotten more 5-ons on Bullet, and it's going to get repetitive, seeing so many Bullet clips from the same spots. I kind of care, not really, though. Just enjoy it and be inspired. Go on Bullet. Hit a clip yourself. And we have just been grinding for a 6-on or quad collat on Bullet because I know how possible, I know how feasible it is to get that one of those two clips, because Bullet is a perfect map. It is long, but it is like narrow, phrasing, but it's a great map for clips. Probably one of the best we have ever seen in COD history for sniper clips.
Oh my god.
It is one of the only maps in this game that have like tangible spawn traps that you can use, because you know, like a lot of the spawns in this game, they're kind of moving, so it's hard to spawn trap, especially on the bigger maps. Obviously the face-off maps are a lot different, and they got small map mosh pit, they got Bullet 24/7, and they got Grind Ooze 24/7. So it's never been easier to pigeonhole a map to try and hit clips on it. You get the rotations down, spawns down, and yeah, it's very nice to have these 24/7 modes. So it's great to see that Black Ops 6 is doing a couple things right. I love it. I love it. It is it's, you know, it's getting some points with me. And then I don't know if we'll show it in this video or not, because I definitely want to put most of my Black Ops 6 clips that I've been hitting lately in this video. I want to make this more of a Black Ops 6 focused video. But we also got hella clips on Cold War. Me and Ludacris Leb last weekend, and that was the weekend that I made the Cold War video a week in advance. I had a lot of stuff to get done this last week, and I did get it all done, and then some, and that is all of these Call of Duty clips you're seeing right now. And then I got Vanguard this weekend as well, and started playing that, because Vanguard, in my opinion, is one of the most overhated Call of Duties. It's definitely better than Modern Warfare 2019, because they fixed a lot of issues Modern Warfare 2019 had. First and foremost being, you can actually see the kill feed. That alone right there is enough for me to put Vanguard above Modern Warfare 2019. I don't want to hear it. I don't care how awesome Quarantine was. Modern Warfare 2019 was not that awesome of a game, and its kill feed was invisible. I got my first 6-on a game where you could hardly even see the kill feed, so that game, my least favorite COD. It definitely has some good things about it. Shoot House being one of them, and Tac Sprint being one of them, but it pretty much just ends right there. So I've kind of been going on, I know what I said about doing a mini Call of Duty tour, and I've still been doing that, but I completely threw the order I was going into the wayside. And I did that because I wanted to play CODs off of feel, not off of schedule. So whatever COD I was feeling, I'm obviously going to hit better clips on, because I'm like craving that COD, and I got like a, you know, like a pulsating desire to play that COD. So what I do is I take one COD I don't want to play and one COD I really do want to play, and make those two CODs my main focus for the time. These last couple of weeks, it was Cold War and Black Ops 6. Black Ops 6 being the one I didn't want to play, and Cold War being the one I was craving. Now I'm craving Vanguard, and I'm forcing myself to play Black Ops 6. Pretty soon I'm going to switch it from those two to Modern Warfare 3 and Black Ops 1. And, you know, that's subject to change, because obviously it's based off of how I feel. And yeah, that's the schedule we're going at right now. And this video might be long enough for me to use all 100-something snippets of clips that I harvested from this last week. It was an insane week. We went Tate McCrazy this week. And, yeah. So I'm going to put those clips to good use and deliver a mini sermon on one of my favorite Bible characters, Saul. And a lot of people remember Saul as not a good person, so they might ask why Saul is one of my favorite Bible characters. Oh, like, you must be thinking there's something really good about Saul, like a really good virtue that you've forgotten, and that's why he's my favorite Bible character, or like one of them, especially Old Testament. And you would be wrong. It actually is because of the reason why Saul kind of has his downfall, that he's one of my favorites. When you talk about a downfall and somebody falling off, Saul is probably one of the oldest examples in human history of that, because it's documented right here in the Bible. The story of Saul takes place in 1 Samuel. Samuel was a prophet of God, and I'm not sure if Samuel wrote the whole book of Samuel, because it is a little bit focused on him, but spoiler alert, he does pass away during this book, and the story continues. So obviously, he could not be writing about these things going on while he was dead. So we're thinking that other prophets may have taken over and continued writing in his name. All of these instances I'm going to be describing from Saul's life, and this little lesson that is reflective of his character will be taking place in 1 Samuel chapter 8 all the way to its final chapter, chapter 31. And so you can follow along as you want to. I have been very much studying this section of chapters in the last month in preparation for this, because I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned in Saul's character. So, in chapter 8, Israel asks for a king. Previously, they had been governed by people God appointed. They were called judges, and as their name implies, they kind of judged and decided what was going to happen and what went on. They were kind of like appointed rulers at that time for Israel. But Israel wanted a king, and they wanted a king like other nations. So, God decided to give them a king. It was not a king that got imposed on them. They wanted to have a king themselves. I think that's kind of important to note right there. And the story of Saul starts out very wholesome. He is anointed by Samuel, and he starts off very humble. Saul is described as being manly and tall, and he definitely stood out as a leader, kind of like Optimus Prime. In chapter 10, Saul is made king, and then later in chapter 11, confirmed king after he rescues some of his people from the Ammonites. Now, there's an important part of the Bible that I think I should mention right here, because this is, kind of a little sermon about Saul's downfall, and I'm going to say it right now. It's kind of supposed to be a warning against covetous thoughts and jealousy and envy, because that's ultimately, in my understanding, what leads to Saul's downfall.
No.
But in chapter 10, at the very end, it's as Saul is returning to his home, accompanied by the men whose hearts God had touched. Some troublemakers came and said, "How can this fellow save us?" And they despised him and brought him no gifts, referring to Saul. But then it says, "But Saul kept silent." And so that's kind of a strange, out-of-place verse at the end of this little chapter. And I think the reason why it's put there is because it's supposed to show signs of doubt, like seeds of doubt that were placed into Saul's mind that kind of led to an insecurity that led to a jealousy and envy of David when we skip ahead. So Saul starts off pretty strong. He is the king that the Israelites really want. But later in chapter 13, Saul basically defeats this Philistine little army. And not a little army, I should say, but he does defeat a Philistine army. And he makes a sacrifice to God after it without Samuel. And why this is such a big... Because Samuel was running late, Saul got impatient and made the sacrifice without Samuel, which people of Saul's standing were not supposed to. It was supposed to be up to the God's appointed priests who made sacrifices and stuff. Or at least that is my understanding of it. Because God gets really mad at Saul for this. And Samuel basically says that his kingdom won't endure any longer, and God is going to appoint a man after his own heart. So, in my opinion, this is a little harsh. I think Samuel kind of did Saul dirty here. Yes, Saul did disobey the ceremonial customs of the time, but Samuel was also running late, which is kind of not cool. And it is you know, in my understanding, the punishment doesn't fit the crime. So I could kind of sympathize with Saul a little bit here. But, you know, God's will be done and not ours.
Definitely.
And his ways are higher than our ways. This is a pretty messed up situation for Saul. But in life there are such situations and instances like this where we seem to be dealt an unfair hand, but all we can do is react in a positive or negative way. You know, life is what you make out of it. And ultimately, you can make the most of a bad decision by how you respond to it, not by how you react to it. And I think Saul more so reacts, and he doesn't react in a very constructive way.
Had so much steam
whatsoever.
Oh my goodness, I'm bad at quad feed, but I ran out of.
Later on, there is the story of David and Goliath. David kills Goliath. Most followers of Christ are familiar with this story, and many who do not follow Christ are still aware of this story. The oldest underdog tale in the book, David kills Goliath, and they gain the upper hand against the Philistines, which is pretty sick. It's a great story, and David starts to become the people's favorite. And they have the saying, Saul has killed his thousands, and David has killed his tens of thousands. And Saul hears this and gets very jealous of this. And it's said that God puts a spirit of evil inside of Saul to torment him. David is this good harp player, playing the harp, calms and subdues the evil spirit God puts inside him. And there's just so many things here. Like, why would God put an evil spirit in somebody? I don't know. I really don't know. I think he obviously had a plan for Saul, but I'm not God. And if anybody has any insight on this little part where he puts the evil spirit inside of Saul, mention of this is in 1 Samuel 16, verse 14. Now that the Spirit of the Lord had departed from Saul, an evil spirit from the Lord tormented him. So it very clearly says from the Lord right there that this evil spirit was. It's really sad, and there's plenty of people out there that are unlucky and bad things happen to, like Saul. So I think Saul is a pretty relatable character, and he's clearly a very insecure character figure in the Bible, and he becomes very jealous of David. Despite how David calmed his evil spirit, he tries to kill David because he knows that David is going to one day take his place as king, and he is covetous of it. And the 10th commandment, as we know, is not to covet. Not to covet from our neighbor. To make matters worse for Saul, in chapter 15, Samuel tells Saul to go and take out these Amalekites, kill all of them, don't spare any of them, and destroy all of their possessions, all that belongs to them. And instead, Saul takes their king captive and spares their calves and lambs and food and whatnot for themselves, plundered their treasure, and destroyed everything else. So he destroyed the stuff that wasn't as important, and God was not happy about this. And at this point on was pretty much when God fell completely away from Saul, or really the other way around, I should say. Samuel was deeply grieved by this, and this is where the famous, quote that God prefers obedience over sacrifice comes from. In chapter 15, 1 Samuel chapter 15, verse 22, but Samuel replied, "Does the Lord delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as much as in obeying the voice of the Lord? To obey is better than sacrifice, and to heed is better than the fat of rams." So that's a huge verse right there. I'm just going to keep reading into verse 23, for rebellion is like the sin of divination, and arrogance like the evil of idolatry. Because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he has rejected you as king. So that's a pretty tangible break right there for Saul, where the downhill slope starts to begin, it would seem, and starts to go down at an exponential rate. When you talk about the fall off needs to be studied, this is the study of Saul's fall off. So a little roadmap for everybody following along in their Bibles. Saul is anointed in chapter 9. They wanted a king in chapter 8. Saul's successes are featured in chapters 10 to 12. His first screw up is in chapter 13. Then there's something about his son in chapter 14. His son is Jonathan, David's best friend. The two of them are a great picture of brotherhood that the Bible kind of illustrates. In chapter 15 is where the Lord truly rejects Saul as king. Then David is anointed in chapter 16. That's when the focus of this book of the Bible starts to shift towards David as the hero and Saul as this villain who had kind of fallen away. David and Goliath is chapter 17. And then beyond that is starting to shift towards David being on the run all the time for Saul because Saul's insecurity has taken over. He wants what David has, which is the future as king. And this ultimately leaves Saul to try to kill David a couple times. But every time God hands Saul over to David and David spares him, Saul grows even more crazed. He consults a witch, and the witch consults Samuel from the dead for Saul. Obviously, this is another sin, the sin of divination, so the charges against Saul are just racking up. Samuel basically says that the kingdom is going to be swept up away from Saul and handed over to David, and that the next day Saul is going to die. And in the next couple chapters, Saul takes his own life because he is struck down with arrows from the Philistines while he is in battle. All of his sons are also killed, which is pretty sad because Jonathan's a pretty cool character who helps out David a lot as David is on the run from Saul for a bulk of this book of the Bible. So yeah, very sad stuff. And younger me always thought that it's such a sad story because in the Lutheran system, you're taught that suicide sends you straight to hell because you're ending your life with the sin of murder. And so that was really sad to me.
It's called Liam.
But upon reading chapter 28, which is the chapter in which Saul consults the witch of Endor, Samuel says to him in chapter 17, "The Lord has done what he predicted through me. The Lord has torn the kingdom out of your hands and given it to one of your neighbors, to David. Because you did not obey the Lord or carry out his fierce wrath against the Amalekites, the Lord has done this to you today. The Lord will hand over both Israel and you to the Philistines, and tomorrow you and your sons will be with me. The Lord will also hand over the army of Israel to the Philistines." So right there, Samuel is a man of God, and he is saying that him and his sons will be with him. To me, that is more hope than not that Saul went to heaven, and that by killing himself, he did not damn himself to hell forever. So ultimately, I think that God had mercy on Saul and was able to use him for his greater plan. I mean, obviously, that's what God does with everything. So why do I like Saul so much? Well, for 3 reasons. Reason number 1 is he's a pretty relatable character of the Bible. He is somebody who fell away from God's favor, but Saul made pretty simple mistakes. It's not like he killed a bunch of people who didn't deserve it. He wasn't executing babies. He wasn't taking people's wives. He wasn't worshiping false gods. He got impatient, and he also got jealous and paranoid. And that's something us common folk would probably do 1,000 times over in Saul's situation, especially with not a whole lot of lessons of something like this happening before Saul. He really did pioneer this person with a lot of power trope who falls away from all that power and kind of squanders it through his own mistakes. So he's relatable. Reason number 2, he's a good example of what not to do. He is replaced by David ultimately because God wants somebody after his own heart, and Saul was not that. So, whenever we are feeling jealous or insecure or paranoid, as Saul was, it's best to take that to the Lord and try to get back in his good graces, as opposed to trying to take everything in our own hands. In Proverbs, it even says to trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding, which is exactly what Saul ended up doing. So, to me, it's nice right there to have an example of what not to do. And reason number 3 is that it gives us hope in light of our failures. Samuel told Saul that he was going to be with him tomorrow, even after all of his failures. And B, God is able to use Saul's failures to put David in position of power. And David being a person who Jesus was born from a family line of, like he was born through David's family tree, the savior of the world. And David was a great king over Israel. He obviously has mistakes too. Maybe we'll cover that one day. But ultimately, I think Saul is a pretty powerful story. He's relatable, he's an example of what not to do, and he gives us hope in light of our mistakes, because Jesus does still love us, and he wants us to love him the same. So yeah, I know that was a little bit of a scatterbrained little reading right there. It's something that's been on my heart to talk about for a while, but it was a lot to cover and a lot to organize in one video. And I'm still getting better at this. So I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you take this to heart. If you can take away one thing from this, it is the dangers of coveting and worrying and paranoia. Ultimately, those things are just instinctual reactions, not what we're called to do, which is lean into God. It's clear to see what a lack of that course of action created in Saul's life. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed. I love you. God bless you. Peace out. I will see you next time.
Alright, tee up. Come on, lads. One more final push. Close game. Mighty close game we got.
Oh, dude.
They're gone. Enemy
I
spotted.
feel like this is such a clippable lobby.
Smoked.
Oh, siege.
Down.
Go off.
Joke
That was a
6 on, I
five-on.
believe.
That was a 5 on.